What's going on, everybody? My name is TAETRO, and today I want to talk to you about the brand new Roli Studio Editions. Let's check it out. Alright, first things first, if you enjoy live electronic music performances, tutorials, and content to make you a more productive producer, you should click the subscribe button down below. If you want to hear my music, you can follow me on Spotify, and also you should follow me on Instagram because sometimes I post beat making videos that don't always make it here to the channel. But for now, let's start talking about Blocks Studio Edition. Roli has just released the Studio Edition of all of their blocks. That's the Seaboard block, the Lightpad block, and the Songmaker kit. And if you don't know, the Roli blocks are these really expressive MIDI controllers that utilize MPE or multi-polyphonic expression. So you can use pressure and motion in different ways on these blocks to get a more expressive sound out of your digital instruments. Roli is sponsoring today's video so I can give you a closer look at their new Roli Studio Player. The Studio Player can be run from inside your DAW as a plugin and really opens up the world of control for your Roli blocks and helps you better integrate all the great MPE sounds that Roli has in their library into your workflow. Seriously, this pretty much turns the blocks into a studio command center. But before we do any more talking, I want to go ahead and show you what this can really do. Alright, let's take a closer look at how I used the Roli Studio Player to create that track. So looking at the blocks as they are right now, they look pretty familiar. I have got a couple different grid setups. These two are exactly the same. This one I've set up as a 3x3. I've got a live block and I've got my Seaboard block. As you might have guessed already, I'm actually using Roli Studio Player as a plugin within Ableton Live. Now notice when I open Roli Studio Player, my blocks change, and they change to reflect what's on screen with Roli Studio Player, which is essentially all the sounds you have in your collection of sounds from Roli. That includes Cypher 2 sounds, Strobe, and Equator, all in one place, and several different of these modules which I used throughout my beat session, and I'm going to take you through each of them one by one. The first one I used is called Smart Chords. Notice I'm only playing 2 notes, an octave here, but I'm getting a nice luscious chord, and that's because of smart chords in Roli Studio Player. Now the live block becomes super useful in this setup because I can turn on each of the different modules from here without clicking on the computer. So if I press the chord button, now smart chords is active. If it was off, I would just get normal notes. If it's on, I get my chords. And I've assigned this block here in the center to control smart chords, and I did that by using this drop down menu, and you notice it gives me a perfect picture of my setup right here. It automatically detects that, and you can select which block you want to assign to that spot. You can also use the little lock icon to make it so that when you exit out of Roli Studio Player's plugin window, the block will stay like that. Otherwise, it'll go back to its normal default block mode. But since I'm swapping between different tracks and functions, I'm going to keep it unlocked, and I've got it assigned to smart chords right there. So I'm able to select the key, and I can even navigate that by using the live block by selecting the scale button here and scrolling through. I'm going to leave it in C sharp, D flat, major. And then within the chords, now we get access to each of the diatonic chords in that scale, but I can make each one of them more or less complex. So the first chord, the D flat or the tonic of the scale, I have set to a ninth. You can see down below here what notes that it's playing. I also have it selected to add a bass note, which means it won't just play one root note, it'll play an octave as well, which gives me a nice deep sound, especially when I play both octaves. Notice I've got that D flat 1 way down here. But as I said, the complexities of the chords, I can toggle this with these strips right here. So I can go from just a normal fifth to a triad to a sus4, a sixth, seventh, 11th, and I skipped over 9, which is what I used. And you can do that for each of the chords in the scale. So you can see that I have varying degrees of complexity. I only used 3 chords in this track. I've got the D flat, the F, which is a 7th chord, and the G flat, which I have as a 6th. Being that this is a really mobile setup, that's really convenient because I only have access to 24 keys here. And also it gets me to using a lot more luscious and complex harmonies a lot faster than if I was experimenting with these different chord types on the go. I can more just scan through the different complexity and find the tonality that I'm looking for. So here being the 9th. Notice down here we've also got access to a strum feature, so it will actually, instead of playing the notes all at once, when you play, it will strum through all the notes in the chord. So let me just crank that up a bit and you can see what happens on the screen. Notice that it strums through each of the notes, and it does that up and down. So if I slide this slider to the left, now we're going to go down the chord. Or you can have it in the center, no strum. It just plays right away. So that was, of course, the first sound in that beat session. Let's move on to another one so I can show you how I used some of these modules. Exiting out of Roli Studio Player puts my blocks back in their default mode. And then opening up this new window of Roli Studio Player, the blocks will reflect this new instrument. So here I have a kalimba instrument with the arpeggiator on. So I've got this block right here assigned to the arpeggiator. And the arpeggiator is probably one of my favorite features because it's a multi-layered arpeggiator. And again, with the live block, I can toggle it on and off. There's 3 layers to this arpeggiator, so you can control each of the 3 layers right from the block, and you get access to hits, offset, rate, and octave. And I really love the way that it's displayed on the blocks here. You can see each of the different layers as they're triggered. So I can adjust each one of these on the go. I can even turn them off if I want to. So if I turn layer 2 and 3 down just to 0, no hits, and we can just hear the 14 hit layer here. That's really simple and obviously not the feel I was going for in the track. But now let's go ahead and turn layer 2 back up to 16 where it was. And let's hear that feel. A little bit more syncopated, which I like. And then add that in again with layer 3, which is going to get 9 hits. And of course it's got its normal ARP controls, dotted, straight, or triplet, and then which direction it goes. I left mine as up. and it's got swing controls. I believe I left mine on hold as well, so I can just play the notes and hands off. But again, not really having to touch the computer much, just going right onto a track saying, yes, I want an arpeggiator, and then playing with these different layers, which is different than most arpeggiators that I've used. I mostly use Ableton's built-in arpeggiator, which is not multi-layered as far as I know. Let's move on to another instrument and another aspect of Roli Studio Player. Here I want to show off instrument macro controls. So using dark, warm bass, and each instrument has these macro controls here. And they're slightly different for each instrument, but they change some character of the sound usually. So here we've got a digital morph, a chorus, and an overdrive. I used the overdrive when I was performing this bass, and I used it to kind of fade in as the note sustained. So and of course, even though it's in Roli Studio Player, while I was performing and recording that beat, it did record the automation for that overdrive, which is nice. But in addition to those three macros there, I can switch over and now I get an XY pad, which is unique on every instrument. So those are on macros, just like macros in Ableton Live, where in Ableton you usually get access to 8 knobs. In Roli Studio Player, you get access to 3 different parameters as faders, as well as an XY on each track. Before I talk about the next aspect of Roli Studio Player, I'm going to go ahead and exit this one out and freeze it. And I just want to talk about how convenient it is for the workflow that if you don't have these locked to any parameter and you exit out of Roli Studio Player, the blocks go back to whatever layout you've set them to in the blocks dashboard. So I like to finger drum on a 3x3 grid, which means that when I played the drums for this track, I could just exit out of my instances of Studio Player, go over to Ableton's drum rack, and I have access to my drum rack the way I like to play it on the blocks. I just thought that that was a convenient workflow thing. And let's look at the final layer so I can show you the last module. So here I've got some chimes that I've played. It's actually MT Music Box Gamelan 5D. And you know, just to reiterate, so again, it has macros here. I can switch on smart chord. I've already got this block assigned to that. Oh, and that's actually a good example of the strum, a little bit better than the pad from before. You can actually hear each hit. Turn chords off. But what I actually used, I didn't use any of the macros besides audio effects, which I've got on this block right here. So with the audio effects module, you get access to up to 4 effects. And you can use it a couple different ways. This is single mode, so I can scroll through each of the different effects. So I have filter, low and high, distortion, a bit crusher, which is the effect that I used, and a reverb. And each of them will obviously affect the sound. And these are momentary effects. You have to be pressing the block to use them, or you can actually toggle hold for each of them so that they're not momentary, they'll actually hold on. But again, I used the bit crusher specifically, so it sounded like this. And that's just one type of bit crusher in Roli Studio Player. If you open these drop-down menus, you can see that you have access to a bunch of different effects. But like I said, that's the way to use them one at a time. There's also a multi-mode here where I can use all four. This almost looks like a video game like Pac-Man or something. So I would not only have access to my bit crusher, but I have access to my reverb, my filter, my distortion, yeah, and there you have all four of the major modules of Roli Studio Player. And what this does is takes the Roli blocks and turns them into this studio command center where it's just so convenient. I mean, this is almost like a DAW inside my DAW. I've got my library of really amazing sounds, obviously, a lot of them taking advantage of the MPE of these blocks. I've got macro controls, smart chords, a multi-layer arpeggiator, and momentary performance audio effects that can also just be normal audio effects if I turn them into hold. What the convenience of this interaction between the blocks and the studio player does is it keeps you in the music making process so that you're dealing just with the instrument in front of you. You don't have to deal so much with clicking around on a screen, which is ultimately the goal and why I love controllerism and trying different controllers. All right, so what did you think about the Blocks Studio Edition with Roli Studio Player? For me, this was sort of the missing link with the Roli blocks. Initially, I had been mostly using the blocks dashboard to customize the blocks to how I would otherwise use them in Ableton. But to be able to fully utilize the blocks and what they can do and all the sounds in the Roli library, it felt a little bit disjointed from my Ableton experience. And what this allows me to do is fully take advantage of all those sounds and the versatility of the controllers and use it in a seamless way within my DAW. Let me know if you already own blocks and if you're gonna check out the Studio Player, but also let me know if you've held off on buying Roli blocks and if this new Studio Player integration is moving you closer to picking one up. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy, thumbs down if you didn't, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more live electronic music performances, tutorials, and content to make you a more productive producer. This has been TAETRO. Have a good one.